The fog of Whitechapel was thick as a funeral shroud, cloaking a killer who moved like a wraith through London's darkest alleys. It was 1888, and the East End was a cauldron of poverty, vice, and despair. In the span of 3 brutal months, 5 women, Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly, were slaughtered with a savagery that shocked even the hardest souls. Their throats were cut, their bodies mutilated, their lives erased by a phantom the press dubbed Jack the Ripper. He was never caught, his identity a riddle that has haunted history for over a century. But what if the Ripper was no mere criminal? What if he was a man so shielded by power, so cloaked in privilege that the law could never touch him? His name was Prince Albert Victor, Eddie to his family, grandson of Queen Victoria, second in line to the British throne. To the royal court, he was a golden heir, a shy prince with a charming smile. To the shadows of Whitechapel, he may have been something far darker. Could a prince born to rule an empire have been the monster who carved terror into London's heart? Step into the fog, and let's uncover the bloody truth. Born on January 8, 1864, at Frogmore House, Prince Albert Victor Christian Edward was a child of destiny. As the eldest son of the Prince of Wales, later King Edward VII, Eddie was second in line to the throne of the British Empire, an empire that spanned the globe, its flag planted on every continent. His grandmother, Queen Victoria, ruled with an iron will, and she saw in Eddie the future of her dynasty. His childhood was one of unimaginable luxury: golden nurseries at Windsor Castle, governesses who spoke 3 languages, and summers at Balmoral, where the Queen herself taught him the weight of royal duty. He was a delicate boy, with fair hair, pale blue eyes, and a quiet demeanor that endeared him to the court. Portraits show him in velvet suits, gazing softly into the distance, a prince born to inspire loyalty. But even in those early years there were signs of trouble. Tutors noted his listless disposition, his struggle with the simplest lessons. At 13 he was sent to the naval training ship HMS Britannia, but his reports were dismal. Slow to learn, easily distracted, prone to sudden silences. By his teens, Eddie was enrolled at Trinity College, Cambridge, but his academic record was abysmal. He preferred the bohemian circles of artists and actors to the rigid etiquette of court. Whispers began to circulate, rumors of late-night visits to London's East End, of opium dens where the air was thick with smoke, of liaisons that defied the strict moral code of Victorian England. Some dismissed these as the excesses of youth. Others saw a darkness taking root, a shadow that grew with every passing year. By 1888, at the age of 24, Eddie was a prince adrift, caught between the glittering world of Buckingham Palace and the sordid streets of Whitechapel. What secrets did he carry in night? The royal archives, guarded like a fortress, hold fragments of Eddie's hidden life, locked away for generations. Victorian physicians, bound by oaths of loyalty, recorded troubling symptoms in coded language. One doctor, Sir George Savage, noted in 1886, "The prince suffers episodes of profound confusion, as if his mind wanders to places we cannot follow." Another, Dr. Thomas Bond, wrote of violent fits of melancholy, followed by bursts of agitation that alarm his attendants. Some suspected neurosyphilis, a disease contracted in the brothels of London's underbelly, where princes could mingle unseen with the desperate and the damned. Syphilis, in its tertiary stage, could ravage the brain, causing hallucinations, paranoia, and uncontrollable impulses. Others pointed to a hereditary condition, perhaps schizophrenia, passed through the interbred. Bloodlines of European royalty, where cousins married cousins to preserve power. Modern science casts a stark light on these clues. Neurosyphilis can erode the frontal lobes, stripping away empathy and restraint, turning a man into a vessel of rage. Schizophrenia can fracture reality, transforming desires into obsessions, fears into violence. In 2015, forensic psychologist Dr. Emily Hart studied Eddie's reported symptoms and drew a chilling conclusion. Prince Albert Victor exhibits the traits of a disorganized sexual sadist. His behavior, impulsive, erratic, driven by inner demons, aligns with the profile of a killer who acts on compulsion, not calculation. Court records hint at desperate measures: mercury injections, a toxic treatment for syphilis, sedatives to calm his fits, even whispers of electrotherapy to shock his mind into submission. But there was no cure for what ailed Eddie. If his mind was breaking, could it have driven him to the streets? a prince cloaked in darkness wielding a blade? The Ripper's reign of terror began on August 31, 1888, when Marianne Nichols was found in Bucks Row, her throat slashed, her abdomen torn open. The brutality was unprecedented, even for Whitechapel's violent slums. On September 8th, Annie Chapman was discovered, her organs removed with a precision that suggested medical knowledge. September 30 brought the double event. Elizabeth Stride, killed swiftly, and Catherine Eddowes, mutilated with surgical cruelty, her kidney taken as a trophy. The final victim, Mary Jane Kelly, was found on November 9th in her Dorset Street room, her body so savagely dismembered that police could barely identify her. The city was paralyzed with fear. The Ripper taunted the police with letters, one signed "From Hell," accompanied by a piece of human kidney. Witnesses offered fleeting glimpses: a well-dressed man, seen near Bucks Row, his speech like a gentleman's. A figure in a dark cloak hurrying from Miller's Court, his face obscured. Where was Prince Eddie during these horrors? Royal diaries place him in London for every murder, often with gaps in his schedule. On August 31st, he was at his father's residence in Pall Mall, just 3 miles from Whitechapel. On September 30th, he attended a dinner at Marlborough House but was unaccounted for after midnight. His movements were loosely monitored, his handlers accustomed to his nocturnal wanderings. Then there's Dr. William Gull, Queen Victoria's personal physician and a rumored Freemason. Some theorists claim Gull knew of Eddie's secret life in Whitechapel's brothels, where he may have sought forbidden pleasures. They suggest the murders were a cover-up, targeting women who knew of the prince's indiscretions, perhaps even a secret child or a scandalous affair. The Freemasons, with their oaths of secrecy, could have shielded a royal killer. Were these murders the work of a lone madman, or a conspiracy to protect the crown? If Eddie was the Ripper, the truth was a threat to the British Empire itself. The royal family, at the zenith of its power, could not survive the scandal of a murderer in its ranks. Letters from Queen Victoria to her grandson, once frequent, disappeared from the archives after 1888. Medical records, including Dr. Gull's private notes, were sealed for a century. Some burned in what palace insiders called a cleansing of the past. Inspectors like Frederick Aberline, who led the Ripper investigation, were abruptly reassigned, their files locked away. In 1889, the royal family announced Eddie's engagement to Princess Mary of Teck, a German princess whose impeccable reputation was meant to restore his image. The betrothal was rushed, announced mere months after the final Ripper murder. But the questions persisted. Why was Eddie sent to India in late 1889? A 7-month tour that kept him far from London's prying eyes? Court gossips whispered of a prince who was unstable, a man who needed to be controlled. Some claimed he was briefly confined to a private sanatorium in Surrey, his name erased from the records. Others spoke of secret meetings at Buckingham Palace, where advisors debated how to manage the prince's behavior. The evidence is fragmented, like pieces of a shattered mirror. Missing documents, silenced witnesses, a prince whisked away at the height of the Ripper panic. The crown's honor was non-negotiable, and the truth was buried deeper than the bodies in Whitechapel's muddy graves. What kind of man could commit such atrocities? FBI profilers describe the Ripper as a figure of privilege, his violence rooted in entitlement and rage. Eddie fits this profile with unnerving clarity. Raised in a world where he was both worshipped and confined, he was a paradox, a prince with no purpose, a man above the law yet chained by expectation. His mother, Princess Alexandra, adored him, shielding him from criticism. His father, the Prince of Wales, demanded a son who could embody the empire's strength. But Eddie was weak, his mind drifting, his temper unpredictable. Tudor's diaries reveal a troubling portrait. In 1884, one wrote, "The prince is distant, his eyes like glass. He speaks little, but when he does, it is of strange things, blood, blades, the night." Another, in 1886, recorded, "He screams in his sleep, muttering of knives. Always knives. I fear what lies within him." Aides noted his coldness, his sudden rages, his habit of vanishing for hours. Modern profilers see a pattern. Dr. Emily Hart, in her 2015 analysis, wrote, "The Ripper's crimes were chaotic yet deeply personal. The mutilations suggest a need to dominate, to destroy what he could not control." Eddie's upbringing, stifled, scrutinized, yet untouchable, could have forged a man who saw murder as an act of power, a rebellion against his gilded cage. If Eddie was the Ripper, His royal status was his greatest weapon, allowing him to slip through London's shadows, a predator protected by the crown. Prince Eddie's life ended on January 14, 1892, at Sandringham House, at the age of 28. The official report cited influenza, a complication of a cold winter, but the story unravels under scrutiny. Court physicians gave conflicting accounts. One mentioned pneumonia, another a fever of unknown origin. A private letter from a nurse, discovered in 1960, hinted at something darker. The prince was not himself. He raved, spoke of blood, and then fell silent forever. Some whispered of poison, administered to silence a dangerous mind. Others claimed an overdose of sedatives, a mercy to end his torment. A more chilling theory persists. Eddie was quietly institutionalized, his death staged to protect the monarchy. In 1970, a researcher uncovered records of a royal patient, admitted to a remote asylum in Kent. In 1890, listed under the name John Clarence. The description, tall, fair, prone to violent outbursts, matched Eddie's. Photographs of the prince, with his gaunt face and piercing eyes, bear a haunting resemblance to police sketches of the Ripper, particularly one from Miller's Court. After his death, Queen Victoria issued a decree. No mention of Eddie's name was to be made in public. His personal effects, diaries, letters, even his childhood toys, were destroyed in what one courtier called a fire of necessity. Why the erasure? Why the silence? Was the royal family hiding a prince? Or a monster? History remembers Jack the Ripper not as a man, but as a myth, a specter in the fog, a faceless killer who emerged from the dark alleys of Whitechapel, committed unspeakable acts, and vanished into the night without leaving a trace. He became the embodiment of terror in the heart of Victorian London, a ghostly figure wrapped in whispers and shadows. But what if the Ripper wasn't a ghost at all? What if he was flesh and blood? What if he was royalty? Prince Albert Victor, Duke of Clarence and Avondale, the grandson of Queen Victoria, second in line to the throne, was a man born to rule, but perhaps destined to unravel. Raised within the opulence of palaces, his life was meticulously controlled, but beneath the polished surface lay rumors of instability, scandal, and a deeply troubled soul. As the East End of London bled, and as the mutilated bodies of women surfaced in the dead of night, the possibility began to surface, however quietly, that the killer might not be some anonymous madman, but someone much closer to the crown. The evidence is murky, but not without intrigue. Letters went missing. Royal records were sealed. Eyewitness accounts were dismissed or silenced. There were murmurs of a royal figure seen in Whitechapel. During the times of the killings, a prince in the wrong place at precisely the wrong time. The possibility of Prince Albert Victor's involvement, or even his knowledge, presents a nightmare not just for historians, but for the British monarchy itself. Could the royal family have buried the truth, fearing the fallout would shatter the empire? The Ripper's crimes did more than butcher 5 women. They ruptured the illusion of safety and civility in an empire that prided itself on control. But if the truth behind those crimes pointed toward Buckingham Palace, it would have been too catastrophic to reveal. The very idea that a man born in silk sheets, educated to rule, adored by the public, could be responsible for such brutality would have shaken the monarchy to its core. And so the possibility remains. Was this killer protected, shielded by his bloodline, hidden behind a fortress of royal secrecy? The royal court, as history shows, has always known how to protect its own. When danger lurks within its walls, silence becomes its sharpest weapon. As the public screamed for justice, the institution may have chosen survival over truth, and the world was left to wonder, to connect dots in a tapestry deliberately left incomplete. You've walked through the fog of history. You've heard the whispers that refuse to die. Now ask yourself, could a prince have truly wielded the Ripper's knife? Could the darling boy of Buckingham Palace, the empire's golden heir, have been the demon that stalked Whitechapel? And if he was, would the world have ever been allowed to know? Would justice ever have been possible? When the killer wore the crown,